my friends, how are you doing? My name is Olivio, and today I want to talk about the abilities of AI, the limitations of AI, but more importantly, I want to take you on a journey through the dramatically changing landscape of art and culture and what kind of impact AI is having on that, because this technology turns basically everything upside down and it asks very pressing questions about who we are, what art is, and what we understand as culture and the cultural process. But before we can delve into that, we need to understand a little bit more about what AI actually can do and what the results look like. So let's get started there. So first I want to start this on the page of Midjourney. This is an AI that has very, very high abilities of creating beautiful images just from text. You can also use image input, but only as an inspiration, not as a direct reference. And as you can see here, when I click on these different works that have been created by the AI with the input of the community, it can create all kinds of beautiful artistic styles. It has a very good control over the composition, over the colors, over the different artistic techniques, over representing different kinds of materials in this digital format. So it can simulate all kinds of, for example, paint like acrylic or oil paint. It can do also sculptures or reliefs, as you can see here, as images, of course, not as actual objects. It can do digital paintings, it can do 3D, or it can also do photography, all kinds of different styles. Of course, all of that is being trained on what we as humans have done in the past, on how we experience art. This is basically a reflection of how we create all kinds of different art. You can see here, this looks a lot more like photography. Of course, it also has different styles. This has this kind of more, I would say, Lightroom adjustment. You have this kind of teal and orange look in it. There you have a pattern design. You can also do tiles that are seamless and endless tiles. So that is pretty amazing. And it has a huge potential to do amazing things. Now, Midjourney is limited in the way that you can influence the images and the outcome of that. So a lot of that is very random, but it can do all kinds of styles and you don't have to change any kind of models or stuff like that. You just enter the text prompt, and because of that, it is very easy to use. Here we have something that's more abstract, but as you can see, all kinds of styles, materials, all kinds of things are possible with the AI. Even expressions here, emotional expressions. Again, this looks like a photography, so that is very, very amazing. Now, of course, you might want to have a lot more control over what you're doing, because after all, artistic expression needs control to actually create the stories, the expressions, the compositions that you want to have. So if you want to have a lot more control, you would, for example, use automatic 1111. As you see, there's a lot of input here from the different levers we have here, from the different settings, the models, the sampling methods, the upscaling methods, all these kind of extensions you have down here. Most importantly, control net, which I want to show you now, that can give you a lot of control over the input. So what this does, and here we have an example of different methods, is that you use an image as an input. For example, here the image, a photo of a bird, and then with the control net method Kenny, this is basically an edge finder, you can see that we get this reduced image of the bird, and then the AI can render different versions of that bird. So you can create hundreds of different versions of this bird or anything you want to do. Of course, there's other methods, like, for example, here we have line maps. This is good for example, architecture, because it finds straight lines inside of your image. And then, as you can see, this can create different variations of the same room with the same composition in the room, with the same perspective, but then different room design. So again, this is very good for prototyping, for coming up with different design ideas, color concepts, and so on that you can show to your customer, and then try to find the real world objects or create them after the ideas that the AI has given you. Here we have another method. This is called Scribble, where you can do a simple drawing, and then the drawing can be turned into AI images, from realistic to all kinds of other styles, so that you can simply draw down a little sketch and then turn it into a painting, into a photo, into a 3D art, whatever you want to do. There's a lot of other methods. Here, for example, we have fake scribble, which is taking a photo and then turning it into a scribble. And as you can see from this backpack, we can create a lot of different designs for that have kind of the same structure to it. So again, this is very good for prototyping and giving you ideas, but you can also, of course, as you see here, give the image different kinds of compositions and then create variations for that. So this, of course, as you can imagine, gives you a lot more control over the process. There's even other processes here. Here we have one more that is using a line drawing and then colorizing it. So we have different variations that stick very closely to the anime image and then create, again, different variations for that. And of course, again, this can give you a very fast process of prototyping and a high control over what you want to create. And of course, in the text prompt, you can also point out what kind of colors you want to use. You could write a red dress, a blue dress, a green dress. It's not going to be exact colors down to the color code, but it is going to take inspiration by the text prompt you have entered. So there is still a long way to go and a lot more ways to be developed to control the artistic work and the input control that you have over the work. Another system I also want to show you is called ComfUI. Now here you have nodes that you might know from software like Blender and other tools, for example also DaVinci Resolve and so on, that use these kind of nodes to get connections between the different parts of what the AI is doing. And with that you can basically create your own AI workflows and processes. You can build all kinds of different machines that can do different things for you, and this can be very, very useful. And of course, it gives you a lot more control over the process of what is happening when in the process. Here you can see another example of a workflow. This is much more complex, and what this workflow is doing as a result is that it can combine different areas and different prompts into one image. So you can see here that we have here the sky with the stars, then we have clouds and a sunset, then we go lower and we have a landscape here below, so that all of these different areas are then afterwards combined into one consistent image. And when we scroll even lower, we can see that you can also integrate a character on top of that that is also rendered with high detail. And even though this has a lot of complexity, this can give you a lot of control, and at the same time you can still automate that process and with that experiment a lot, but also save a lot of time. Another way to control AI, especially with Stable Diffusion, is to train your own models or LoRa's, and you can also download a lot of community-trained models or LoRa's. Now, the difference between a model and a LoRa is a model is basically the bigger model that you use to create these images, and usually you use only one model at a time to render the image with the AI, and you can have them in different kinds of styles. For example, you can have something that is more anime style model, specializing on that kind of artistic style. You can have something that is closer to photography, and it becomes better and better to a level where it's really hard to distinguish between an actual photo and an AI image creation. Or you can have different styles of digital paintings that you can create with that. But on top of that, you can also use LoRa's. Now, those are used as smaller models that influence the output of the larger model. You can train them on the likenesses of people, on different artistic styles, on objects, and so on. So, for example, here you see a LoRa that is made for kids' illustrations, so they get more of that kind of style. You can also see that they are much, much smaller to download, but you need to use them together with a larger checkpoint model that I've showed you before. Now here we have a LoRa that is trained on these cute sewing style dolls, also very cute, these kind of knitting dolls. And here we have likenesses of famous actresses like Scarlett Johansson or Margot Robbie, but of course you can also train them on yourself or photos of your friends or people that you work with for your artistic projects. And what this also means that you can train your own models on your own images or other styles is that AI can stay contemporary and do the same art you do at the same time that you're doing that art. So this does mean that AI is not stuck in the past because of only creating things that it's seen before. You can always feed AI with new images, new inspirations, new styles, and the AI can create images based on that input to be a companion for you on your site. And now that we have talked a lot about the abilities of AI, let's talk a little bit about the limitations of AI. And one of the biggest things here is that AI as of now has a big problem with consistency. So here again we have images that are from Midjourney. They are very beautiful. If you look at them just as examples you find on the internet, it would be very hard to tell if this was made by a person or by an AI. But on the other hand, the thing here is that if you create 100 of these images, all of these 100 images are going to look completely different and have a different artistic styles in them. So making them coherent, consistent, and have control over the smaller elements of the images, but also the larger elements of the image is still a big challenge. Now, of course, that is important if you want to create something artistically. So for example, here on the right side, we have this very ornamented, very nice stormtrooper, but it would not be possible today to create the same details on the armor in multiple images from different perspectives, because right now this is something AI cannot do. And of course, this level of control is very important for artists to actually create their artistic expression and consistency. Here we have more images that look like photos, but again, these are created by Midjourney and they are very beautiful from the quality. But again, the problem here is about the control of the different elements. For example, in the right image, the furniture is hard to control, to move that around and have this kind of very specific composition you might want to have. Like I showed you before with ControlNet, you can have influence on that, but not down to the most precise detail. On the left side with the photo of the woman, if you want to have specifically that kind of fabric, that kind of clothing, the expression of the light, of the colors you have in this image, in multiple images from multiple perspectives, you would not be able to do that. Now, I want to present you with a pretty challenging statistic. When you look online, you will see that they did different tests, and on average, people who go to a museum look at the paintings for around 3 seconds. And that means even if you have trained all your life to learn that craft, and this might be your biggest masterpiece, and you actually manage to hang in a museum where people can visit your work, they're just passing by and looking at it for a couple of seconds, not diving too deep into what they're actually seeing. And that is kind of interesting because this is how we interact with most images, especially today, where we have this very big flood of images, especially on social media, on the different devices, our smartphones, computers, and so on. We are flooded with images. So even though all that preparation in the background is necessary to create beautiful art, the interaction with the artwork itself is often very short and very fleeting. And that, of course, also raises the question, how important are actually the precision of these different details, and could we maybe automate that process? So basically asking the question, what is part of creating art? And so at that point, we come to the big question of how does art actually work? How does our cultural process actually work, and how do we interact with these works? So here I have 2 different paintings for you. And I want to ask you what you think. How far are they apart? Is this painted in the same century? Is it further apart? You can see that they are somewhat similar. On the left side, we have the Madonna with Jesus and some angels. On the right side, we have a different scene, of course, but it's still pretty similar, I would say, right? So you would expect that this is rather close together from the time it was painted. Well, actually, the image on the left side is from 1468. The image on the right side is from 1774. That is over 300 years. 300 years. Now here, I want to show you another example. On the left side, we have a portrait of a person, of a man standing there. On the right side, we also have a portrait of a person. So basically, again, similar from what is depicted in the image. Two guys, two portraits. How far are they apart? Because they are very different. Is it 100 years? Is it 200 years? How long took it take to have the difference between these two images? Well, actually, the image on the left side was painted in 1859 and the image on the right side was painted in 1889. There's only 30 years in between. This dramatic shift in artistic focus, in artistic aim, in artistic expression, in the purpose of what art is in itself. Art has completely been redefined. Now here's another image I want to show you. This is from 1895. Sorry, the number is a little bit cut off, I see right now. this is a color photo. This is one of the, if not the oldest color photos we have. 1895. Let's go back here. This is from 1859, the painting on the left, and this color photo is from 1895. Now, what has the one thing to do with the other? Well, of course, the invention of photography, where before you had a very long and slow and cumbersome process to create a portrait that is realistic of a person, has become a matter of pressing a button to create that image. But of course, we also had another invention in roughly the same time frame, and that is the industrial creation of color in tubes, because before it was a very slow and cumbersome process to create these colors, so you can even paint, and also on top of that it was pretty hard to create consistent color and color quality over time for your paintings. And of course, this had a dramatic effect on how you can actually paint. So you will find that before the industrialization of color, most painters never left their studio because it would take hours to prepare the colors and it would not be feasible to go outside and paint right in nature. After we have industrialized colors and we have color tubes, artists have been a lot more free to go outside, but of course also a lot more free to experiment with all kinds of colors, because they just need to go to the shop and buy these colors, and then they can paint right from the tube. Some of the artists even painted directly with the tube on the canvas. And this is why we see this dramatic artistic shift in an age where an image that is realistic is readily available, but just pressing a button on a camera. Creating realistic paintings is not the pressing issue anymore. So you are free to explore art in its fullest potential and ask the question, what is art? How far can a painting go? Can art go maybe beyond the painting? And what does all of that mean? Where can we find ourselves inside of art? So this is also asking existential questions. Now, of course, at this point, we do have AI, and as you've seen before, AI can not only create any kind of artistic style from the past, but also you can train it on contemporary art right now on your own sketches and painting to make the AI create images based on that. So basically, we not only have overcome the technical process of creating an image with a machine, we have also overcome the artistic process of the style, because the machine now can also create any kind of style for that image. And that is a huge implication for art. And one of the most pressing questions this is asking is, what is actually art? And at that point, you have to ask yourself, if you look at a novel, if you look at a music track, if you look at a movie, if you look at a painting hanging in a gallery, we see that as the finished work. We see that as a work that can no longer be changed. This is the final, definite expression, and even touching it, adding anything to it, removing anything from it, kind of destroys the artistic work. But who defines art like that? Who says that that is art? Who says that this is the artistic process? Basically nobody. The reason why we think about it in that way is because this is the limitation of our human potential, because we only have so much time, we only have so much energy. So at some point, we have to stop and say, well, that is it. Now we are finished. This is the painting, this is the movie, this is the audio track, and we're not going to change that anymore. Now today, I want to challenge that perspective and also make you think about the actual potential of AI. Because one of the things that I often hear in comparison or when people talk about AI is that AI is being used to create the same thing we did in the past, but just with the help of AI. Now, as we have seen with the arts changing through industrialized color and photography, art has completely changed to its inner core, to the philosophy of art, to our understanding of what art actually is and should be about. And AI is doing the same thing. And for that reason, we have to ask ourselves, what is actually the artistic work? And because AI can go on in the process, it raises two questions. First of all, should there be a finished work? And secondly, do we have to have this tight grip over every single detail in the work? Now here, I want to show you more examples and delve deeper into what I mean by that. And the keyword here is the sandbox. Of course, an artistic work as a sandbox is kind of complex to understand in the sense of a movie or a novel or a painting. So I want to show you the example of Minecraft because most people know that. Now here we still have an artistic work that has a set of rules, it has an expression, it has a dynamic on how this game works. But because this is a huge sandbox, everybody can do inside of the world with these rules, with this setup, what they want to do. They come up with their own stories. They can create their own servers with their own styles, with their own worlds. You can change the textures in there. So basically you can make this into your own artistic experience, into your own expression. And everybody has a completely different story they experience at that moment. But at the same time, this is a product that has been created by a person with an idea, with a vision, with a concept, and that concept is open-ended. Now, AI can do the same thing for us with all kinds of other media, and at the same point, redefining how we understand the process of art, what art is, and how we understand culture. So I want to give you another example. Let's say we have a novel that's easier to understand about a Blade Runner world. So what would you do to create that kind of novel? Of course, in the past, what you would do is to write out the story and then just have the different chapters and print it or publish it as an ebook. And everybody who reads that story reads the exact same text, the exact same chapters, and has the exact same experience with that story. Now, what would be the alternative for that? So, for example, instead of writing the story, you could write a body of knowledge about all the different characters, their life experience, their background stories, their habits. You can describe the world, you can describe the rules inside of the world, and you can also give the main story that is happening there as an outline and then use all of that to train an AI with that concept. And if you want to, the AI can even add more elements to that. So now, instead of experiencing the same story for every reader out there, the reader could say, I want to know more about that character. I want to have a conversation, for example, with the detective, but also with the person who is running the noodle shop on the corner. I want to talk to that person about their everyday life, have a chit-chat, maybe order some food, and have a little bit of a role play inside of that world, and then go on. And the story unfolds over time, so that in a certain way, the novel becomes more like an experience where everybody can unfold it in their own way, but at the same time, you have a certain setup, you have a certain language that is used, you have a certain expression, you have a certain style of the world, and there is rules inside of the world of how it works. So still, this is a consistent artistic work, but it also gives you the freedom to play with that, and it can even evolve in the future into newer things, because different people can have different experiences and everybody can have their own story within the story that you can create. So with that sandbox concept alone, we already have a fundamental redefinition of what art and an artwork is, because the artwork becomes open, it becomes fluid, it becomes dynamic, and every work can become a little universe in which you can move freely, while the artist sets up the rules and the concept of that world. And that is an amazing and very interesting process, and it makes art alive. It's no longer a piece that is statically hanging there without it being able to be touched or changed or interacted with. You can really experience and delve into that universe, that thought, that artistic concept. So that is already a very beautiful change. But there is another element about what AI can do for us. And that is also something that has to do with photography and how photography and technology overall has changed our perspective on art. Here is an interesting thing that is happening that AI is doing, because we can train it on all kinds of artistic styles, and it can create these thousands and millions of variations in that style. There's one thing that is missing from AI, and that is the actual human understanding why something is used. And that is important in art, because the meaning is the core of an artistic work. So that can be also a huge benefit, actually. Now, why is that a benefit? Well, if you think about art as we create it, as people with our mind, we are captured, we are jailed by our emotions, by our habits, traditions. We are fitted into the world that we live in, and we cannot escape outside of that. We are a victim of our habits. And because of that, everything we do is automatically under the control of these habits. You cannot escape the way you think and the way you do things. But AI can. AI is not bound by that, because AI doesn't have a mind of its own. It doesn't understand what it's doing. It only creates things that kind of look like what it was trained on. And because of that, it can create all kinds of crazy output, crazy creations, and then you can find meaning inside of them. Let's have a look at some examples. So here I have works that have been created with the LoRa that is trained on more artistic expressions. And let's zoom into that. You see here, there's a lot of different things happening at the same time, very strange connections. So we have here a structure of a skull, but then this skull is turning suddenly into soft tissue, even though it's keeping the same colors, the same materials. Then we suddenly have gold paint around the eye, and then up here we have structures that look a little bit like a coral reef, but also like feathers, like soft tissue, like fabric, but also then down here like bone that is melting into these other areas. Some elements look like an eye. It is all very strange and very random, and it doesn't really make too much sense, but at the same time, you as a person can find sense inside of it. Here we have another image where suddenly we have a humongous eye here in the side of the head. Up here we have something that looks like a horn of a small deer. And again, we have here these coral reef elements. We have here these feather elements. There's a little bit of a flower element down here. All kinds of crazy elements that are combined here. Here we have another beautiful example of something that looks like a bird and is again very, very strange in the way it is standing there, in the expression, these humongous eyes it has here, the very strange snout with even the teeth in here, these kind of shimmering elements on the body, these kind of hairs. It looks like at the same time it is cut open, but also we see the outside of this strange creature. Now the importance of all of that is that our mind is always searching for reason, for purpose, for expression, for meaning. And because AI can create these random things that are at the same time based on our cultural heritage, because it is trained on the way that we create artistic expressions, we can at the same time see something that mimics our artistic language and expression and also doesn't have its own sense to it. It's created randomly without much purpose behind that. And you can fill in these gaps by finding something in these works that you find amazing and that will give you new reflections of who you are, what you want to create. You can find new meanings and understandings about culture and life inside of these random creations. Of course, again, we have historic examples of this process. When we open our minds to other cultures and to self-reflection upon what art is and how we think about the artistic process, but also when new technologies are introduced into society and change fundamentally the process of how we create everyday things around us. So on the left side, we have Picasso, who is hugely influenced by African art. And on the right side, we have Andy Warhol being very strongly influenced by the industrialization of products, by mass production, by the standardization of how the packaging looks so that everybody is using, in this case, the same soap pads. Here we have two more examples. On the left side, we have the Pissoir by Marcel Duchamp. Now, this is very important because the artwork is not created by the artist. This is something that has been industrially created and then just used by the artist as a symbol, as an expression. So that means at that point, the work doesn't even have been made by the artist anymore, but still it creates a massive, very important expression and symbol inside of art, and especially that this is a pissoir, which means that the industrialization and standardization of your life has come down to the moment, even when you take a leak, a very private moment in your life, and still the standardization has influence on even that moment, and that is a huge impact and a change, a shift of what culture is, how our everyday life is influenced. Now on the right side, we have a work from Picasso, again using an industrial product, a bicycle, and reforming the parts into a new expression, in this case, the head of a bull. So again, the elements of the work have not been created by the artist. The artist reformed elements into a new expression to say something, to create a new artistic style, but also a new way of what art can be, how art can be created. So all of that is massively important to understand what AI can be and where the journey of AI is going. And this is the biggest message I want to give to you today. The biggest challenging question I want to leave you with today is, don't think about AI doing the same stuff we do today, but just by using AI. Think about what kind of new opportunities, what kind of new universes are opened by the way that AI can create, especially because it is independent. It can create millions of variations. It can create whole universes that are based on your input, on the data that you train the AI on, so that art can become dynamic, it became fluent, it can become alive and be an experience that is different for every person who is experiencing your artistic work, so that an artwork is no longer a final point to be arrived on. Art instead, with the help of AI, can become an experience and a process that is ongoing and ever growing. And that is the most important way to rethink and redefine what art and an artwork is. Think about how can you include AI in your process, but also how would you change your process with this powerful new ability that can be applied basically to everything from images to music to text to even interactions with dialogues with characters, or how video game worlds or other worlds play out. Thank you very much for watching that lecture. I hope you enjoyed my input and see you soon. Maybe check out my channel on YouTube. Bye!